Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie O.
And I'm Sally Burdett. Our top stories. Kenya's president bows to intense pressure and dumps controversial tax changes as the country mourns 23 people killed in protests.
Our other headlines, at least 15 Palestinians are killed in the latest Israeli strikes across Gaza, with reports of fierce fighting overnight in Rafah.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu under pressure as the Supreme Court rules ultra-Orthodox Jewish men must be drafted into military service.
And it was once considered undrinkable, why Britain's wine industry is now the toast of the town. Kenya's President William Ruto has dropped the controversial finance bill that would have raised taxes after those deadly protests on Tuesday.
The death toll has risen to 23 after police opened fire on crowds of mostly young people trying to storm the Parliament building. The President said Kenya, battling massive debt, must live within its means.
And following the passage of the bill, the country witnessed widespread expression of dissatisfaction with the bill as passed, regrettably resulting in the loss of life, destruction of property, and disabration of constitutional institutions. On my own behalf, and on behalf of these members and many other Kenyans, I send my condolences to the families of those who lost their loved ones in this very unfortunate manner.
Our correspondent Giram Chala reports now from Addis Ababa.
As you understand, over the last few weeks, the uprising, the public roar against his administration has been challenging for the president after the introduction of what is known as Finance Bill 2024, which, by the way, proposed to put a heavy tax on day-to-day items and focusing mostly on the people themselves. It's been really hard for many Kenyans to accept it, and the bill, which was supposed to pass, by the way, today, was finally scrapped. The president, now addressing the public, also confirmed that he will not be signing that deal, and the finance bill proposed is now withdrawn. This is a great victory for Kenyans, for most people who have been protesting over the last few days and months, although the fact that 23 people, according to reports from different authorities, claims that 23 people have lost their lives because of the confrontations with police, now that the reason why they went on the streets is off the way. It is really a victory for them, and the Kenyan government is saying that, also President Ruto is saying that we need to find other ways of paying our debt, billions of dollars, by the way, from the international community, and also financing the budget that he and his government is proposing. So the situation is expected to calm down perhaps in the next few days. So the Finance Bill 2024 proposed to slump tax in almost everything, day-to-day items that people use for their lives, including milks, cooking oil, and anything that you can mention. And that directly affects the Kenyan population so much. And taxing these items means that people may not be affording, their lives, their day-to-day activities, raising their children, also paying for their schools and other things. People also always say that life is becoming difficult because of the financial, economic situations of the world, especially post the pandemic era. And also the economic situation of the country. So finding jobs has been hard. The corruption rate in the country is high. And if you add, gas into the already flaming situation, which is the, proposed Finance Bill 2024, this is going to be difficult for all of them. That's the reason why many Kenyans took up, whatever they can find. They went on the streets, and they even invaded the Parliament building, asking the government to withdraw the proposed bill. Some people, as I was saying earlier, have been killed. So many people have been injured. Police was brutal. The army was also involved at the same time. But finally, it looks like this situation all over Kenya is going to be concluded, because now the president has decided that he will not be signing the proposed bill but still believes that Kenya needs to find ways of collecting tax or pay its international debt. Otherwise, the situation in the country could be difficult for a longer time. But for now, Kenyans have got answers, and there won't be any heavy tax that's going to be slumped against them.
John Mubaku is Brady Presidential Distinguished Professor of Economics at Weber State University, Utah in the United States. He told me the Kenyan government should have done more to prevent those protests turning violent.
Most important thing to remember here is that whenever you have public protests, it's always possible for individuals, opportunists to join the group and try to do things that have nothing to do with the protest. But I think that you can avoid that if the government, instead of reacting violently, comes in and tries to help the protesters carry out their job in a peaceful manner and bring forth their grievances to the public authorities. I think that if Kenyan authorities had not reacted violently the way they did, I believe that it would have been possible to minimize what the government is claiming to be criminals. It's very common for authorities to downplay protesters who are trying to bring their grievances to the government by claiming that these people are criminals. I believe that if the police authorities in Kenya had done their job properly, we would not have the kind of violence that we have right now. So I don't really believe that most of the protesters were criminals. I think a majority of the protesters were peaceful young people who were trying to bring their grievances to the government. And it is possible that there were individuals in there who were opportunists and who invaded the protest. But I believe the president's idea that the protesters were criminals is not accurate.
John, let me ask you about where we go from here, because this finance bill was passed by the Kenyan parliament. It's now been dumped by the president. Kenya's financial challenges, though, have not gone away, have they? So where does it go next as far as fixing the money goes?
I think that what the government needs to do now is to make sure that the country remains peaceful, because these protests are impacting negatively on two very important parts of the Kenyan economy. One of them is tourism, which is very important for revenue generation in Kenya. The other one is foreign investment. In order for the country to move forward and be able to generate the revenues that they need in order to solve these debt problems, they need peace and security, which is very important for economic growth and development. Many of the taxes that were being imposed by the government were going to significantly burden ordinary people in Kenya, especially young people who are engaged in the gig economy, also an important part of the Kenyan economy. So I think that what the government needs to do now is to try to bring peace and security to the country so that it can continue to bring in tourism and foreign investment. But perhaps most importantly is that the government needs to correct itself from the mistake that it made.
Boeing's biggest labour union is demanding a 40% pay rise for over 30,000 staff amid a series of safety and production crises. The union, which represents machinists in Seattle, wants the pay increase as part of a deal to secure work at the site for decades to come. Boeing is under intense scrutiny following a series of incidents, including a mid-flight panel blowout. Earlier this week, prosecutors ruled the plane maker should face criminal charges related to the crashes of two 737 MAX planes.
The Czech billionaire hoping to buy the parent company of Britain's Royal Mail has published his offer. Thousands of former and current Royal Mail staff are being asked to sell to Daniel Kretinsky's investment group after he offered $4.40 a share. Kretinsky needs the approval of 3/4 of the shareholders, although he already owns over 27% of international distribution services.
Pilots of the Irish airline Aer Lingus have begun industrial action over pay. The walkout has led to around 270 flights being cancelled. Talks to avert the strike broke down on Tuesday, but fresh talks are expected on Thursday. Another strike is planned for Saturday. The trade union wants a 24% pay rise.
Japanese yen has dropped to its lowest level against the dollar in almost 40 years. The US dollar was trading at 160.39 yen, a level not seen since the year 1986. Japan's Ministry of Finance and Central Bank spent $62 billion in April and May to try to support the currency when it fell past 160.
Volkswagen and US electric vehicle startup company Rivian have announced a plan to share technology. The German automaker is to invest $5 billion to produce software-defined vehicles. Let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett, in New York. Hello, John. What is behind the deal?
Hello, Sal.
Why is it happening now? It sounds a little bit like playing catch-up. Am I wrong, though?
Well, no, you're wrong, I'm afraid to say you are. Yeah, let me explain. No, let me explain. Basically, this is Europe coming to the rescue of an American EV maker. That's essentially what it is. And we broke this story last night on the Washington, D.C. version of this program. It came out just before we went on the air. Look, the story is this. There are so many EV makers in the world, they can't all survive, okay? When we were 100 years ago designing petrol engines, there were 300 people producing cars in America, and it's down now, as you know, basically to the big three in Detroit, which is Stellantis, a Netherlands company, which we call Chrysler still really, and then Ford and GM. And so this is going to happen with electric vehicle makers as well. Now, at the moment, the big ones in America are GM, Ford, and Tesla. And in Europe, BMW, VW, which we're talking about today, and Renault in France. And, of course, in Asia, BYD out of China, Toyota, and Hyundai. Now, so here comes VW, German car maker, rescuing Rivian. So what's the problem with Rivian? Well, the problem is that it's based in Irvine in California. It's had one or two issues in the courts, but more than anything, people are now eschewing EVs a little bit. Certainly in America they are. And Rivian only makes EVs. That's all it does. So the other companies like Ford and GM, they have a wide range of products they can offer people, but Rivian only offers EVs. But as you know, there's all sorts of incentives for people to buy EVs from the government, and they're certainly not going away. And Rivian also has a deal with Amazon to provide a staggering number of EV trucks, 100,000 by the year 2030. And that is presumably in some doubt if VW didn't step in. They are stepping in to the tune of $1 billion immediately, $5 billion over 5 years. It's a technology and software issue that they're going to come together on. So they'll share technology, they'll share software stuff. And Rivian shares are really soaring this morning here. They're up 28%, up 28%. And why wouldn't they be? Because it's seen as a real vote of confidence in this American EV producer, which has been struggling up till now. And the boss of the company, Rivian, has just said that he intends to use some of the money, the first tranche of the money, to build a new factory. So I think they have one in Irvine in California. They're going to build a new one in Georgia, in the south of the country, and that's in keeping, really, with a lot of new manufacturers who, over the years, people like Toyota and Mercedes and all those, they don't go to Detroit because they're not really welcome there, but they go to the southern states, and Rivian is doing the same thing in Georgia.
John, also staying with cars, we're hearing that car dealers are struggling. Why is that?
But this is an amazing story. This really is. It's a bit of a pot boiler, really, a bit of a slow burner, because we did touch on it last week very briefly, but it's still going on. Do you know there are 15,000 auto dealers in America? Well, no, there aren't. I think it's just over that. It's like 16, maybe 17,000. 15,000 of them can't get online anymore. And it's been going on for the last week, and there's no end in sight. They were all hacked. And so what's happening now is that the sales personnel are going around writing chits on paper. And they go, hang on, we haven't done this for years. How do you spell Toyota? Does Rivian have a Y in it? You know, all that kind of stuff is going on. And I mean, seriously, I'm not even joking. They really are doing it all on paper. The problem company is called CDK, which was founded in 2014 in Illinois, in the Midwest of the country, and they're the ones who were hacked. The people that own them, Brookfield Business Partners, their shares are down 1% now and 8% on the month since all this started happening. And seriously, they're saying that it may take months, if not years, to fully restore this, which is a big problem. And now, briefly, we get into the realm of fantasy a little bit, because some people are saying this is going to affect the retail sales figures when they come out in June. I don't know whether it will or not. All I can tell you is there were $122 billion worth of transactions in the auto industry in May. That's 17% of U.S. retail sales. So the forecast is for retail sales in America to be dented negatively by about 2.3% in June. But let's worry about that if and when it happens. The point at the moment is that you can't go into a dealership and buy a car without going through a lot of even more paperwork than they ask of you anyway.
Gosh, so many advances, and yet when it all comes tumbling down, pen and paper is our best friend, isn't it? Thank you very much, John Terrett in New York.
Thank you, sir.
Some of the big names from the business world are gathering in China for what's known as the Summer Davos. Our correspondent Su-Shin Chen spoke to Deloitte China's deputy CEO, Dora Liu, about how international companies view the Chinese economy.
The first 5 months, we have seen very strong performance of 3 sectors. First and foremost, manufacturing, no doubt. Second is service consumption. And third is external demand. You can interpret as export. I'm very confident that we can achieve 5%, more than 5% GDP growth in this year.
During the opening session for Summer Davos 2024, the Premier mentioned that the Chinese market is relatively competitive with a talent pool and, of course, a large consumer market. So how confident are global firms in terms of investing here in China?
Very good question. And actually, on May 28th, we, Deloitte, hosted a new MNC summit in Shanghai with more than 200 guests from all over the globe, mainly the C-suite of global Fortune 500 companies, government officers, think tanks, and chambers of commerce. So the consensus we all reached at the MNC summit is China as the market and the economy is too big, too important, and too good to ignore. So that's the consensus. Definitely there are complexities, but compared with the complexity, the opportunities are much more.
Poland is hoping China will open its market to Polish meat. During his visit to Beijing, Polish President Andrzej Duda lobbied for his country's steaks and sausages. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger visited a meat processing plant in Poland.
For the first time, Polish beef is set to be shipped to the Chinese market. Paweł Zakrzewski is one of the country's first meat producers to apply for the export license.
China is a very big market. We can expand the quantities that we produce a lot. If we finish the registration process, and we will be fully allowed to export our meat to Chinese market.
While Poland is importing many goods from China, exports to the People's Republic have been modest.
Now Warsaw is hoping China will wider open its market to Polish meat products such as poultry, pork and beef to balance out trade relations.
Poland is already the European Union's largest poultry producer and is looking to use this know-how to increase its beef production. Zakrzewski's family business recently opened its 4th meat plant in Poland, creating capacity to expand to new markets like China.
According to this protocol, we have to register in a special system, and we have to fulfill all the veterinary requirements stated by the Chinese authorities.
One of his competitors has already completed the export registration. Zakrzewski hopes he can follow and start exporting boneless beef to China within a few weeks. Johannes Pleshberger, CGTN, Krajewo, Poland.
NATO has formally appointed the outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte as its next Secretary-General. Ambassadors from 32 countries chose Jens Stoltenberg's successor. The new NATO chief will oversee the alliance's response to the Ukraine conflict at a time of heightened political volatility in Western Europe.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Israeli strikes across Gaza kill at least 15 Palestinians, with fighting in Rafah intensifying.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Israeli strikes across Gaza have killed at least 15 Palestinians, with reports of fierce fighting overnight in Rafah. Since early May, Israel's ground operation has focused on Rafah, a key entry point for aid from neighboring Egypt.
Hundreds of thousands of Gazans sheltering there have now fled. Meanwhile, the United Nations is pressing Israel to provide safe routes for aid workers in Gaza as humanitarian groups warn of famine. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari is in Gaza.
In Gaza, the situation is still extremely tense. The bombardment has been non-stop for the last few days, or for the last few weeks and months as well. Around 60 Palestinians were killed in the last 24 hours. Around 140 more were injured due to the Israeli ongoing bombardment. In Al-Nusayrat area, in Gaza central area, 8 people were killed in the last couple of hours, amongst them 3 children. In Jabalia, in the very north of the Gaza Strip, 5 people were killed and 1 child died because of the malnutrition, the issue that has been becoming a pressing issue for the Palestinians, who have been making calls for the international community to provide them with the life-saving food because of the ongoing Israeli operations and ground operations in that particular area and in the Gaza South as well. According to the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, there were only 4 trucks that were allowed into the Gaza Strip since May 1st, which means 4 trucks in around a whole month, and that is indicative of the seriousity of the situation and of the suffering of the people, who have been appealing for the international community to extend a helping hand to them, whom were also affected greatly by the lack to everything that might be eaten for them to keep themselves alive. The situation in Rafah is also still very extremely tense. The bombardment could be heard everywhere, and also the advancement of the Israeli troops in different parts of Rafah city is also noticed by the people who are following the news about the situation in Rafah. They have been redeploying, and they have been again advancing into area that is called Dibna in Rafah, and an area also in the east of Rafah, and they have been bombarding different places, destroying residential blocks, and also targeting people with the quadcopter. They have been using also the artillery fire intensively, targeting the different blocks of Rafah, and also targeting different places in Gaza North, in Jabalia, and in central Gaza, and in Khan Yunis city, because the eastern areas of Khan Yunis also have been experiencing intensified bombardment for the last 36 hours, and there were 3 Palestinians killed because of that bombardment in Khan Yunis eastern area. The artillery fire is used heavily in those areas, and the fighting is still continuous in Rafah, where the fire exchange can be heard even from Khan Yunis, and the sound of the Apaches, the helicopters engaging and shooting at some targets on the ground could also be heard, which means that there's some fierce fighting going on in all different parts of Rafah.
Ikram al-Satri there. Meanwhile, in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under pressure after the Supreme Court ruled that ultra-Orthodox Jewish men must be drafted into military service. Netanyahu's government, which depends on the support of ultra-Orthodox parties, must now find a way of complying with that ruling. Let's speak to our correspondent, Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Hello, Jonathan. Any signs that this Supreme Court decision is causing cracks in Netanyahu's coalition government, or indeed within his own party?
Yes, it seems to be happening step by step. It's not as if the government will be toppled tomorrow, but the Netanyahu coalition has been saying again and again that there's no need for such a ruling as the one that the Supreme Court presented yesterday, but rather that the coalition will bring its own sort of a bill to conscript and to send to military service a certain amount of ultra-Orthodox people. The problem, as far as the coalition, is that not all of its members actually support this. They're saying, for example, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that he will only support a bill which will enjoy a wide consensus within the Israeli parliament, within the Israeli public. And the bill that Netanyahu is pushing forward is clearly not that kind of a bill. Today, Gallant was joined by the head of the Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, Yuli Edelstein, also saying the same thing, saying he will not support a deal unless it will enjoy wide support, and that is not the kind of deal that Netanyahu and his ultra-Orthodox partners are pushing forward. So already 2 members within the Likud party and also within the coalition are perhaps not going according to what Netanyahu is hoping. This, I say again, will not topple the government tomorrow, but already we're hearing of 2 people and possibly more Likud members of parliament joining, a little bit perhaps shaking the Netanyahu government, something that all of the protests, for example, has not been able to do. This issue is perhaps shaking the foundations.
Yeah, we're also hearing about a call from senior Israeli officials for Washington to withdraw an invitation they've extended to Netanyahu to address U.S. lawmakers. Tell us more about that.
Netanyahu is supposed to speak in front of Congress next month, and Israeli officials, and not only them, American officials as well, are concerned that Netanyahu will use this ground to speak against the Biden administration, against perhaps the Democratic Party, and in this sense, Israel could perhaps lose one of its strongest weapons, which is the bipartisan support within the American Congress, within the American society. It happened in 2015 when Netanyahu spoke in Congress, when former President Obama was sitting at the White House, and it caused a major rift between Netanyahu and the Obama administration. It was a serious blow to the relations in 2015, and if this happens now in 2024, only in a scenario in which Israel is in war, at least in one front, possibly in 2, and when the U.S. is just ahead of elections, 3-4 months ahead of elections, and Netanyahu using the stage, many Israeli officials are concerned that this could lead to the fact that the U.S. that Israel will lose that bipartisan support in the United States, and many here are concerned from that scenario.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv there.
The battle for land between Israeli settlers and Palestinian Bedouin shepherds in the occupied West Bank has been raging for years. Since the 7th of October Hamas attack on Israel, settler violence has increased, forcing thousands of Palestinians to flee. Our correspondent Sarah Coates reports.
Protected by live ammunition from Israeli security forces, Israeli settlers are trying to steal sheep from these Palestinian shepherds. This area is another front in the war between Israelis and Palestinians with no sign of stopping. Bedouin shepherds from the Ras Al Ain community near Jericho say they are under daily attack.
Why do they take our sheep? The police officers supported them. The officers were pointing to the settlers to take more sheep.
These shepherds have rare access to a natural spring nearby. Activists say Israeli settlers who've recently established more illegal outposts here have been trying to block their access to water in a bid to isolate them further.
Slowly, they're closing the grazing lands, and after years of terror, now they almost can go out. There is few roads that are blocking this community, and like the army came and says you don't allow to cross this road.
These trenches have also been dug to stop shepherds from moving their flock to better pastures. Shepherds like Aliam Lihat say threats extend further than their herd.
They even entered the mosque we pray at with the sheep they stole. We complained to the police, but there's no answer.
While the settler leader in this area wouldn't comment, lawyers confirm attacks have surged.
Targeting has become enhanced to a degree that we've never seen before. So Jewish settlers are eyeing on their lands, are trying to, and in many cases, unfortunately, are successful in blocking their access to farmlands, to grazing lands, and these communities are in imminent danger of being completely destroyed.
Activists say they often become targets themselves.
We have no other place to go. We have no homes, no land. We have nothing but our sheep, and we live for them.
Activists, though, have not given up.
Guy and his group say they are so fed up with these violent attacks against Palestinian shepherds in the area and are now wanting to take the matter further, handing supporting evidence and a letter over to the International Criminal Court.
For Palestinian activists, that call for international intervention is a fight for existence.
After October 7th, the settlers turned into a pseudo-security force. Even settlers with criminal records, they've become the ones who enforce the law.
While more illegal outposts are being built, people here say time is running out.
We are dying. We want someone to deliver and spread our voice, to support us, to defend us. We are strong. We won't abandon our land. We are born here and we will die here as well.
While that battle cry is getting louder, the fate of Palestinian shepherds here may be well beyond their control. Sarah Coates, CGTN, Ras Al Ain, Jordan Valley.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Free at last, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is greeted by his family as he comes home to Australia.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Sally Burdett. Our top stories. Kenya's president bows to intense pressure and drops controversial tax changes as the country mourns 23 people killed in protests.
At least 15 Palestinians are killed in the latest Israeli strikes across Gaza, with reports of fierce fighting overnight in Rafah.
And Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu under pressure as the Supreme Court rules ultra-Orthodox Jewish men must be drafted into military service.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been welcomed home to Australia, a free man. He was greeted by his family.
It came after a court appearance in the US territory of Northern Mariana Islands, where he pleaded guilty to a single charge under the Espionage Act, ending a 14-year legal battle. Our correspondent Yoloap David reports.
Back on home soil, Julian Assange's relief was clear. He waved to his supporters, who welcomed him to Canberra and embraced his family. Later, his wife spoke to the press to thank the Australian government and ask for privacy as her husband remained silent.
Julian wanted me to sincerely thank everyone. He wanted to be here. But you have to understand what he's been through. He needs time. He needs to recuperate. And this is a process.
3,000 kilometres from Australia, Julian Assange pleaded guilty to revealing US military secrets in exchange for time already served. They were published on the WikiLeaks website in 2010. In court, Assange said he believed the US Espionage Act, under which he was charged, contradicted First Amendment rights to free speech enshrined in America's Constitution. He did accept encouraging sources to provide classified information for publication could be unlawful.
We firmly believe that Mr. Assange never should have been charged under the Espionage Act and engaged in exercise that journalists engage in every day, and we're thankful that they do.
How does it feel to be a free man, Mr. Assange?
He left the Saipan court smiling but without comment. As a condition of his guilty plea, he's required to destroy information provided to WikiLeaks. In the US, he's a convicted criminal, but this agreement also buys his freedom.
Finally, after 14 years of legal battles, Julian Assange can go home a free man. This also brings to an end a case which has been recognised as the greatest threat to the First Amendment in the 21st century.
Assange's legal team maintain Julian Assange and WikiLeaks journalism has been criminalised. After numerous High Court appearances in London, his supporters, as well as legal teams in Britain, Australia and the US, maintain the underlying principle of his defence is free speech, an essential requirement to protect the freedom of journalists to investigate and divulge information in the public interest. But in Australia, as in the US, there are differences of opinion.
Just shone light into darkness, and it's about time that we've had this man released.
I don't think you can go around publishing very, very confidential information and expect to get away with it.
As Julian Assange gets used to life outside detention, supporters say they'll carry on campaigning to clear his name in the form of a request to US President Joe Biden to pardon him and overturn his conviction. Yoloap David, CGTN.
Russia and Ukraine have each handed back 90 prisoners of war. The exchange was facilitated by the United Arab Emirates. Ukraine said their returnees included troops involved in the Azovstal steel mill siege and others taken prisoner at the Chernobyl nuclear power station. Moscow said its prisoners had risked death in Kyiv-controlled areas.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and his Russian counterpart Andrei Belosov have discussed the conflict in Ukraine in the first phone call in over a year. Belosov, who was appointed in May, warned against continued U.S. arms supplies to Kyiv. Austin, who initiated the call, stressed the importance of keeping an open line of communication between Russia and the U.S.
The closed-door espionage trial of the American journalist Evan Gershkovich has begun in the Russian city of Yekaterinburg. The Wall Street Journal correspondent denies collecting information for the CIA about a Russian tank manufacturer. His employer and the US government both strongly reject the allegations, insisting he's been wrongfully detained. If convicted, the journalist faces up to 20 years in prison.
The re-entry module of China's Chang'e 6 lunar probe has returned to Beijing. The first ever samples from the far side of the moon have been retrieved and will be studied for clues about the moon's origins. The lunar probe landed in Inner Mongolia on Tuesday after a nearly 2-month journey.
Well, France provided a special instrument for this mission, which measures radon on the moon. Philippe Baptiste, president of the French Space Agency, says the collaboration opens a new chapter in space cooperation.
Everything has really started about 20 years ago. At this time, our president, I think it was Jacques Chirac, really started and really pushed for developing this space cooperation. It took a bit of time because, I mean, the teams of scientists, of engineers did not know well each other, but now they do, and they work very well together. I must say that while you have mentioned, for instance, Dawn, which is an instrument, a French instrument that was on the Chang'e 6 mission on the surface of the moon. Just to say that the last time we had a French instrument on the moon was in 1970. So it was quite some time ago. And it really shows that it takes time to get people along, to build trust, to build confidence. And this is the case today.
So for a French Space Agency, your focus will be on scientific exploration and satellites. Can we expect more collaboration with Chinese scientists in the future?
China has made a lot of effort to develop its space industry, space business, and we can see that there are many launches every year, and this is impressive to see this development. We are really focused on a purely scientific cooperation with China, with the mission of Earth observation. You have mentioned CFOSAT, exploration with Chang'e 6, and also on astrophysics with the mission SWAM that will be launched. So this is really our focus of cooperation, I mean basic science. To make a successful scientific cooperation or a new program, basically you need to have the idea, the scientific idea, the concept that you want to push and what you want to do as a mission. So it's really a technical and a scientific discussion, plus some budget to make the mission together.
Britain's biggest wine producer is considering raising cash and even putting itself up for sale to fund more vineyards and build a new winery. It's a booming industry transformed by rising temperatures.
Chapel Down, the country's best-known producer, says it's on track for double-digit sales growth this year. The UK wine industry is still small and mostly concentrated in southern England, but higher temperatures create better growing conditions for grapes, with a boom in new vineyards last year.
All this comes as more traditional wine-growing regions, such as Italy, Spain, France and California, are set to struggle in extreme heat. Well, let's talk to Stephen Skelton, who has an amazing title, by the way, a Master of Wine and a viticultural consultant. Stephen, welcome. Good to see you. Many years ago, English and Welsh wine was a bit of a joke, the kind of stuff you served to people you didn't like. They're not laughing now, are they?
Not really, no. English wine has come a very long way since I started almost 50 years ago. Actually, over 50 years ago, but I spent the first 2 years training in Germany.
What's changed?
The climate. That's the top and bottom of it, really. And, of course, it being warmer and warmer at night, which helps with photosynthesis, which is, you know, the bedrock of producing sugars in plants, means that we're now getting, with some varieties, double the natural alcohol, so double the sugar level than we used to 50 years ago. And that's the same for all crops. You know, fruits, apples are much sweeter, plums are much sweeter. And what's that in the wine world? Of course, you know, variety is very important. I mean, you ask an average wine drinker to name 2 or 3 grape varieties that they know, and they'll give you, you know, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon. You ask them to name you the varieties that go into their bread or into their beer or into their, you know, other foods. They will almost have no idea. So varieties are very important, and what the climate change has made us been able to do is to change the varieties that we grow. And, you know, when I started, as I say, I trained in Germany because we grew German varieties, a variety called Müller-Thurgau, which was Liebfraumilch, the basis for Liebfraumilch, and some other varieties that nobody now has ever heard of. But in the 90s, you know, we started to toy around with planting varieties like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And at first they were not really very successful, but things changed sort of towards the end of the 90s. And then since 2003, the trajectory of plantings has been upwards. In 2003, I think we were 200 hectares when I started in 1973. We went down to about 700 hectares in 2002. But as I say, we started rising from 03 from that base, and we're now near 5,000 hectares. We've been doubling every 4, 5, 6 years.
And this was small-time amateurish stuff 30 years ago, wasn't it, in the UK?
Well,
I mean, it's now a big business, isn't it?
It wasn't actually. There were a lot of. I mean, when I first launched my wine, my first wine I made and sold in 1980, I was charging £4.75 for it, which is equivalent today of £30 a bottle. So it wasn't all amateur. You know, my whole life, really, my whole adult life has really been involved with learning about growing and making wine. You know, I'm 76 and I'm still doing it.
Will we eventually see the demise, perhaps, of wines from southern Europe, California, and other hot climates that are struggling?
Well, there's a lot you can do in the fields. A lot that viticulturists can do. With what we call canopy management, so leaf cover. There are newer varieties of vine which may well take over from the more established varieties, which might be a little bit of a problem when it comes to naming them. Although, of course, not all wines are known by their variety name. You know, many red wines, you think of Chianti and Rioja and Bordeaux, Claret. You know, not everybody knows what varieties they're made from, and even Burgundy, you know, Chablis, not everyone knows that's made from Chardonnay. So, you know, there are ways around this, and I think that the best sites will still produce good wines. But you can, you know, the altitude is very important in terms of heat. You know, you can go up the valley hills, and the top sites will become more valuable than the hitherto lower sites. You know, in California now, Napa, the base valley in Napa is really not so important and not so commercially successful as the fringes on the tops of the hills, which were frowned upon at one point.
Stephen, we wish you many happy tastings. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Stephen Skelton, Master of Wine.
Thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Cristiano Ronaldo features as the Euro 2024 tournament ends group stages. And is there a big shock on the cards for favourites Belgium?
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. It's just a month to go until the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. Over 10,000 athletes and millions of tourists will head to the French capital, with all the action starting on the 26th of July. Our correspondent Ross Cullen reports.
Well, a sense of excitement really growing now in Paris ahead of the Olympics. The venues are nearly all complete. Athletes going through their final training preparations, and Paris is ready for the Games. Now, they get underway officially with the opening ceremony on the River Seine on the 26th of July, but the sporting action, in fact, begins 2 days earlier with the rugby and football preliminary matches on the 24th of July. Here, we're at the beach volleyball stadium where the Games get underway for the athletes on the 27th, and the men and women will be battling it out on the sand underneath the Eiffel Tower, a really iconic area for this temporary stadium that can hold 12,000 people. However, not everything is going swimmingly in the lead up to the Games. There is still no certainty that the long distance swimming and the aquatic leg of the triathlon can take place as scheduled in the River Seine, because the pollution levels are still too high and the river current is still too fast. Although, speaking to the organisers, they do believe that in 1 month's time the river level will have come down and the water quality will have gone up, allowing them to take place as planned in the river. Just 1 month to go now until the opening of the Paris 2024 Games. Ross Cullen, CGTN in the French capital.
The mass participation marathon will be introduced as a new event at the Olympics. For the first time, amateurs will run the same route as the Olympic marathon athletes. Our correspondent Lu Xingqing has the story.
你好，您的快递到了。
39-year-old Luan Yushuai has been working as a courier in Beijing for 9 years. He was hailed as the fastest delivery man and won the first prize in the amateur group of the Beijing Half Marathon in 2021. Now he has got a new identity, a Chinese courier to be competing in the Paris 2024 mass participation marathon.
然后在大年30那天晚上，刚好那天晚上我们还在吃年夜饭，然后来了条信息。 我一看是那个2024，然后澳洲委发来嘛，然后一看他写的恭喜于帅，然后中签那个什么奥运会，特别激动当时。这个是一个就是马拉松项目吧，然后他这个是巴黎澳洲委，他是历史上首次就是设置允许就是大众选手可以参与。
The invitation letter came as a big surprise for Luan. He began preparing an application when he saw a notice back in 2021, and he has been fighting to be eligible over the past 2 years. But it's never an easy job to get a ticket to the Olympics. Applicants had to obtain 100,000 credits by the end of 2023, and then win through drawing lots to qualify.
他那个积分是这样的，就是你跑步、游泳、走路、骑车这些都算。我每天锻炼的时间基本上都在2个小时左右，甚至以上吧。反正首先就是跑是正常的话就是跑嘛，肯定就是得达到一个量，就是10公里啊、15公里啊、20公里这样的。跑步1公里，它给积20分，就这样不断的累积，最终累积到10万分，是这样的。
Luan has been good at physical activities since he was a child, and he delivered 30 to 40 more parcels on average every day, the most of his colleagues, becoming the most accomplished staff member of his station within 1 year. He participated in the 2017 Beijing Marathon for the first time upon recommendations of his company, and unexpectedly finished in around 4 hours. From that moment on, he was completely attracted to this sport.
通过终点的时候，然后特别有成就感。然后我就没想到我一个普通人居然能跑完全程。开始的话，我觉得这根本就不可能完成的，但是通过努力，我居然完成了，然后我觉得特别找到了自信。
Marathon is one of the most challenging sports. Luan intentionally combined daily work and training, and he always chooses to climb stairs instead of using elevators when delivering parcels. And he even wears sandbag leggings to increase the intensity of daily training. With less than a month to go to the start of the Paris Olympics, Luan is busy preparing for the competition in all his spare time. For him, running has become part of his life. Luan is about to enter his 40s. Many sports people of his age are looking for something easier. But for Luan, His journey has just started.
我觉得对我来说，输赢不重要，爱拼才会赢嘛。还有，我觉得不管做什么事情，其实跟跑马拉松都是一样，就只要坚持一下，坚持下去，总会就是肯定会更好。我就是希望能够更加努力奔跑，希望能够去感染更多的人吧。
刘信清 CGTN Beijing.
The SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket has lifted off, carrying the final of 4 U.S. geostationary weather satellites into space. The Gozu satellite took off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, completing a $10 billion upgrade to the country's weather forecasting system. The satellites will provide real-time coverage of environmental events, including storms, hurricanes, and volcanic eruptions.
At the Euros, it's all to play for, with Group E's final games before knockout. Favourites Belgium are goalless with Ukraine at half-time, while Romania are currently in top spot. They are drawing 1-1 with Slovakia. All teams have won and lost a game, and all 4 still have a chance to go through.
Well, next up, all eyes on Cristiano Ronaldo as Portugal, who have already progressed, play their final Group F game against Georgia. Georgia need a historic win to go through, while the Czech Republic face Turkey. And that is it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching. And you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Yeah, and coming up next on CGTN is Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of us here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.